August 19, 1942, in the dense jungle near Taivu Point, 2nd Lieutenant Genjiro Imi of the Japanese 8th Independent Anti-Tank Gun Company opened his diary and wrote about the darkness that seemed to breathe. He and 916 other soldiers under Colonel Kayaneo Ichiki had just landed from destroyers, believing they would crush the Americans and reclaim Henderson Field before sunrise. Their commanders told them the enemy was soft, only 2,000 men, untrained and easily frightened. Ichiki laughed off orders to wait for reinforcements. "They are Americans," he said. "We will sweep them into the sea." What he didn't know was that he and his men were marching into the first great disaster of the Imperial Japanese Army, not just a defeat, but the destruction of an entire military philosophy. The jungle itself would become an American weapon. 2 weeks earlier, on August 7, 1942, 11,000 U.S. Marines of the 1st Marine Division had stormed ashore at Lunga Point. Operation Watchtower, the first American offensive of the Pacific War, had begun. Their goal seemed simple: seize an unfinished Japanese airfield and hold it until relieved. But Guadalcanal was hell on earth. 90 miles long, 25 wide, a furnace of swamps, mountains, and jungle where heat and disease killed faster than bullets. Malaria, dysentery, and ulcers ate through skin. Men slept soaked in sweat while mosquitoes swarmed so thick that breathing drew them in. Still, by August 8, the Marines had taken the airfield almost unopposed. They renamed it Henderson Field, after a fallen Midway aviator. Within days, aircraft began landing, and the Cactus Air Force was born. The Americans now had eyes over the Solomon Sea. The Japanese response was swift and brutal. On the night of August 9, Admiral Mikawa's cruisers ambushed Allied ships near Savo Island, sinking 4 heavy cruisers, one of the worst defeats in U.S. Navy history. The surviving transports fled, leaving the Marines stranded with limited food and ammunition. Yet what Tokyo didn't understand was that control of Henderson Field meant control of the surrounding seas by day. From that muddy runway, American aircraft could strike any Japanese ship within 200 miles. Japan owned the night, running fast destroyers in what became known as the Tokyo Express, but when daylight came, the sky belonged to the Americans. Lieutenant General Harakichi Hyakutake ordered Colonel Ichiki's 28th Infantry Regiment to attack and retake the airfield. He instructed Ichiki to wait for the rest of his regiment. Ichiki refused. He had fought in China and the Philippines and believed spirit and courage could conquer any enemy. On the night of August 18, 6 destroyers delivered 917 of his men to Taivu Point, 15 miles east of the American perimeter. The landing was silent, the sea black and calm. Ichiki sent scouts forward, and they vanished. A Marine patrol under Captain Charles Brush ambushed them, killing 31 and seizing documents that exposed Ichiki's plan. General Vandegrift immediately fortified the Tenaru River line, placing machine guns and 37mm guns to cover every approach. At midnight on August 21, Ichiki attacked. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers charged across the sandbar, screaming "Banzai!" But the Marines were ready. Their Browning M1917 machine guns, water-cooled and unbreakable, tore into the darkness. Tracer fire turned night into flame. Those who reached the riverbank met canister shells that shredded entire platoons. Wave after wave fell into the surf. Some reached the Marine trenches. Bayonets clashed with rifle butts, fists, and knives. By dawn, the Tenaru ran red. Ichiki's detachment ceased to exist. 800 men lay dead. The Marines lost 44. Ichiki burned his colors and shot himself. It was the first time Japanese troops had been annihilated in ground combat. The myth of the invincible Imperial Army began to crack. When Japanese survivors reported the disaster, headquarters refused to believe it. They assumed it was exaggerated. But diaries captured from the dead told the truth. Their faith in spiritual strength had met industrial firepower. The Americans had more of everything: ammunition, artillery, food, medicine. Their systems worked. Their weapons never jammed. Their defenses were planned like machines. Japan's courage met America's logistics, and lost. Reinforcements arrived by destroyer, 5,000 men of Major General Kayotake Kawaguchi's 35th Infantry Brigade. Their mission: attack Henderson Field from the south. On September 12, they struck along a narrow coral ridge defended by 840 Marines under Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson. Through the night, Japanese soldiers climbed the ridge screaming war cries, throwing grenades, slashing with bayonets. Marines fired until barrels glowed red. Artillery shells burst so close that fragments wounded their own men. Edson walked the line shouting encouragement, directing fire by flashlight. Sergeant John Basilone held a machine gun position alone after his crews were killed, firing until his gun broke. When dawn came, 850 Japanese soldiers were dead. The ridge became known as Bloody Ridge, a symbol of Marine resilience. Japanese commanders were stunned. The Americans had not broken under night attack. They had turned darkness into a trap. As weeks turned into months, the island itself became a third enemy. Disease consumed both armies. By December, 2/3 of the 1st Marine Division suffered from malaria. Japanese troops fared even worse. The Tokyo Express could bring men but not supplies. Starvation spread like fire. Soldiers survived on rice balls the size of a fist, sometimes one per day. Medical care collapsed. Wounded men were given grenades and told to end their suffering rather than be captured. A Japanese doctor wrote, "Our army is melting before my eyes." Meanwhile, the Americans built systems, supply ships under daylight protection, field hospitals with blood plasma and sulfur drugs, bulldozed roads, and constant resupply. Their machine guns never ran dry, their howitzers never fell silent. The Marines were starving too, but they still had food. The Japanese had only faith. In late October, Japan launched its largest counteroffensive. Over 5,000 troops under Major General Yumio Nasu attacked from the south through jungle so thick that visibility dropped to feet. They faced Marines led by Lieutenant Colonel Lewis, Chesty, Puller and elements of the 164th Infantry. The fighting that night became legend. Japanese soldiers charged in waves, and Marines fought until their guns jammed, then fought with pistols and shovels. Basilone again carried ammunition through machine gun fire, repaired guns by hand, and led counterattacks with his .45. When dawn broke, over 2,000 Japanese were dead. Henderson Field still stood. At sea, the struggle was no less brutal. In November 1942, 4 days of naval combat turned the waters off Guadalcanal into fire. 2 American admirals, Callahan and Scott, were killed in action. But the Japanese lost their battleships Hai and Kirishima, and their last major transport convoy was destroyed. Over 5,000 troops drowned or burned in the sea. It was the last time Japan tried to reinforce Guadalcanal in strength. By December, the 17th Army on the island had collapsed. Soldiers died by the hundreds every day from starvation and disease. Some ate roots, grass, even leather. Commanders radioed Tokyo, "We can no longer fight." Japan decided to evacuate, secretly. Operation Coup, carried out in February 1943, rescued about 10,000 survivors. The rest, over 25,000, had already died. For the Japanese, Guadalcanal was the moment illusion met reality. Their courage, training, and spirit, once unstoppable in China, meant nothing against an enemy who could feed, arm, and replace every man. For the Americans, Guadalcanal proved they could win, not through luck, but through system, organization, and relentless coordination. It was not just bravery that triumphed here, but logistics, industry, and planning. By February 1943, the island was silent again. The jungle hid the wreckage of 6 months of war, rusting tanks, crashed planes, helmets, and bones. The Marines called it the Green Hell. But it was also the birthplace of a new kind of warfare, industrial, coordinated, and total. Guadalcanal marked the turning point in the Pacific War. Japan lost more than 30,000 men. America lost 1,600, but gained the initiative that would carry across the Pacific to Tokyo Bay. For the men who fought there, the lesson was simple and written in blood. Spirit alone could not defeat a system. Courage could not overcome firepower. And war, in the modern age, would be won not by heroes, but by those who could endure, supply, and rebuild. Guadalcanal was not just a battle. It was the end of one world, and the beginning of another.